Welcome S3 to your main topic, which is comparing poetry. We're going to start with a spelling starter today. So pause the video, and what you're going to do is do your spelling starter the way you've been doing during remote learning and write these words down, copy them out 3 times, and then write a sentence that uses at least 3 of the words. Your teacher may ask you to do that sentence on Teams or just into your jotter or both. Unit outcomes then. We are going to write a critical essay comparing 2 poems with similar themes. We're going to read through 5 poems and make sure we understand them. Then the class is going to vote on the 2 you would like to study. We're going to make sure both those poems are annotated. Then groups of you are going to create presentations on various techniques. Then we're going to look at how to write a comparison essay, and then we're going to write the essay. The structure of this course then. Lesson 1 today is all about reading and annotating poems. That might take more than 1 period, but that's okay. Then lesson 2, you will do the preparation for your group task. Lesson 3, you will present what you found and make sure that you fully understand both the poems that you're going to be looking at. Lesson 4, we'll be looking at critical essay skills. And then you're aiming to write your comparison essay in no more than 2 periods. But it might be your teacher just gives you 1 period and then you will be doing the rest at home. And once you've finished your first draft, you will then get a lesson on editing before you hand your essay in. We're going to go through a process called How to Read a Poem. And this is the same process you'll apply to poetry in S4, S5, even S6 if you're doing English in S6. For this task though, the first thing I want you to do is make sure you've got your 5 different poems. So your teacher should have hopefully distributed those poems into your OneNote. You need to make sure you understand each poem as a whole, and that will be on the next slide. Then you're going to have a class vote on 2 poems. And then we will study the 2 poems in greater detail. And what we'll do is we'll put you into pairs, and one half of the pair looks at one of the poems and the other half of the pair looks at the other poem when we're going through them. Okay? So, understanding the poem as a whole. These are the questions that I want you to think about, okay? So what I want you to do is look at the poems, and for each of those poems, work out who is speaking. Is it the poet, or did the poet create a character? Who are they speaking to? Is it a specific person, a particular group, anyone? Then I want you to just read through the stanzas and just quickly work out. You can make some very small notes at the side of each poem, but it's not, I don't want you to spend too long doing this. Just roughly what's happening in each stanza, and then make sure you understand what the whole poem is about. Should say as well, you should have an Apple Pencil to do this, okay? So the 5 poems that you're looking at then are Out Out by Robert Frost, Blackberry Picking by Seamus Heaney, In Mrs Tilster's Class by Carol Ann Duffy, Midterm Break by Seamus Heaney, and The First Purges by Seamus Heaney. So if you remember, just go back, sorry. Who is speaking? Who are they speaking to? What is each stanza about? What is the whole poem about? On you go. Now that you've picked your 2 poems, I then want you to go into pairs. So one half of the pair looks at one poem and the other half of the pair looks at the other poem. And you've already got notes, hopefully, on what the poem is about. Now you're looking at structure and form. So is the poem written in a specific form? Haiku, sonnet, concrete poetry? If it is or is not, make sure you have a note beside your poem to say that. Is the poem split into particular stanzas or is it all just one stanza? Again, make a note beside your poem to say that. Does the poem have a particular rhyme scheme? Is it free verse? Is it a mixture? Maybe there's some rhyming couplets. Remember, at any point, if you're not sure what these are, pause the video, have a class discussion. Now remember, you already wrote down notes on each poem, so try and link the structure to the ideas that you found in the poem. Can you see any patterns or links? Start annotating your poem with all this information. On you go. We're still on structure and form, but we're now thinking about other structural techniques within the poem. Okay? So for example, do you remember enjambement? That's when a sentence runs on to another line, usually speeds up the pace, sometimes used to create a chatty tone. It can also be used to place emphasis on whatever part of the sentence is at the start of the next line. So have a look. Can you see any enjambement in your poem? And again, if you can find it, identify it. What about contrast? Can you see any contrast in the poem? It might be big ideas contrast or just contrast within a sentence. How about climax? Can you see any climax at all in your poem? It could be that the poet gets angrier and angrier, for example. What about lists? Lists are usually used to create a cumulative effect. You might want to discuss what that means with your teacher. And what about repetition? Can you see any repetition, maybe of words, or phrases, or even ideas? Identify any structural techniques within your poem. Now we're on to mood, tone, and atmosphere. Okay? So remember that tone is the attitude of the speaker. You can understand the tone from the words the writer has used and the punctuation. Mood is the feeling the reader gets from the writing, from what the speaker has said. The mood can change throughout. You can think of the mood as the internal feeling, like fear. Atmosphere is the general feeling created. For example, if a speaker uses a happy, chatty tone and all the descriptions of the poem are of fun and joy, then there would be a joyous atmosphere. Think of atmosphere as the external feeling. So if you felt the fear, the atmosphere would be scary or tense. What is the speaker's tone? What mood is in the poem, and does that mood change? And can you identify the atmosphere? So again, make notes beside your poem. Now we're going to think about word choice. Read the poem again, and now you're zooming in. So if you think about when you first looked at this poem, you looked at the general poem overall, and now you're zooming right into the specific words, okay? Can you find different senses in the poem, for example? Circle these and make notes on what senses you can find. Then think about the word choice. Okay, especially the verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. Circle these and make notes about what each word represents. And remember, word choice can help you identify the speaker's tone. Now we're on to imagery. Look for examples of imagery, mainly metaphors, similes, and personification. Okay, start with metaphors. Underline and highlight any metaphors you can find and just make a small note to identify the technique. Then look at similes. Underline, highlight any similes you can find. And then personification. And underline and highlight any personification you can find. If you're not sure what these are, pause the video and have a discussion with your teacher. We've got other figurative language though that we might want to find as well. For example, can you find any hyperbole? What about litotes? Can you find any oxymorons? What about symbolism? Can you find any? What about irony? Can you find any puns? So far you've looked at structure, mood, atmosphere, word choice, imagery, figurative language, and now you're on to sound techniques. Okay, so you might want to speak the poem out loud again, see if you can hear anything. For example, can you find any onomatopoeia? Alliteration. Sibilants. What about the poet's use of plosives? Pause the video, look for sound techniques, and underline, identify them in your annotations. So you've zoomed right in to the point where you're looking at very specific small things, even just the use of consonants. And now you're going to zoom back out again and bring everything back together. These are the questions I want you to discuss as a class. What do you now understand about the poem's meaning? What themes can you see? What is the writer's overall message? Then what you need to do is share your notes with your partner. Okay? So what you're going to do is show your partner your notes and they're going to copy them out onto their poem that they didn't do and vice versa. So by now you should have 2 poems that are fully annotated. Lesson 3 is going to be just one big task, okay? You're going to be in groups of 4. Now obviously you're not going to be doing group work per se, but if you just put 2 pairs together, okay? Each group will look at an aspect of the 2 poems together compared and create a presentation using PowerPoint. You don't need to sit facing each other to do this, and you shouldn't be doing that anyway, but collaborative notes can all be done in a page in OneNote, and there'll just be a page per group. All notes should be in the form of point evidence analysis. So what I would like you to do is, if you say you had imagery and there's 4 of you, I want to have 4 examples of imagery where you're comparing the 2 poems. So you might say that they both use metaphors to do with death, and they both use images linked to loss of innocence, and they both use, or then you could say one poem uses really graphic imagery and the other poem uses quite nice imagery, and so that would be a comparison. Okay, and so you'd have 4 of them, and each person does their image that they're looking at, or their 2 images because it's 2 poems, and then they're going to make a point, support it with the evidence, and then analysis. And you can lay out your notes in different ways. So you could have it as a table, or you could just have it as just a PowerPoint slide with just writing. It's up to how your group want to do it. Okay, so the aspects of the poem then. One group can be charged with summarising the main ideas, the theme, and research into the poet's background. So you're not doing point evidence analysis really, okay? Another group might look at comparing structure and form between the 2 poems. Word choice, imagery, mood and atmosphere, sound effects, and any other techniques. So decide today what you're doing, and then the next time you do this lesson, you will be completing that task in the 80 minutes. And that's it.